Thank you all for being here for the last panel of the day. Good is good for the bottom line. My name is Ramzi Moutran, and I'm here to talk to you about how it's possible that companies and brands can have a healthy business and be a force for good at the same time. And we want to take a look at how companies can do this through the ability to provide good for the common good, as well as good for profits and for business. My background is actually in advertising. I've been in advertising for 20 years. I was the executive creative director for one of the big top networks for a very long time, a bit too long perhaps. Worked with many brands globally around the world, won quite a few awards and sat on quite a few juries, and did a lot of traveling and saw the world quite well. But what I did when I was doing all that, I realized there was a lot of things missing in the world, missing in my life anyway. So when I left, I wanted to start my own agency, and I wanted to do something that could work with brands for good. We're good at the core of those brands, and that's when my agency called Do Epic Good is born. We strive to work with companies and brands that want to position them, use their position of power and influence for a force for good. Our mission is to deliver epic ideas for brands that want to change the world for good. The panel we have here, thank you all so much for being here, are all from great companies that have good at the core of their business plans. And try to go and do something where they leave the planet a little bit better than the way they found it. So they're not only doing good for the environment, but also often humanity. This is when it gets quite interesting, because it can be very good for customers as well as everyone if you do good. People are quite tired of lies, quite tired of the false promises that brands are giving, and they are looking for authenticity, something they can believe in, transparency and honesty from brands. So these panelists hopefully will help us expand on that and explore how that can happen from the inside. So firstly, I'll introduce Corley. Kenny? Kenna. Yeah, Kenna, sorry. She's from a small company called Patagonia. I think we all know about them. So she's the seasoned public affairs and corporate communications professional with nearly 20 years of experience in government, politics, and retail. As Senior Director of Global Communications for Patagonia, she has the best job in the world, I think. She leads the communication strategy for the company's lawsuit against Trump administration and the strategy for Patagonia's 2018 midterms elections. Next up is Amina. Amina? Amina, sorry, I keep getting that wrong. She's the Interim Executive Director for Sustainable Apparel Coalition. Through Amina's leadership, the Sxsw enables social and environmental value chains, sustainable and scaled in something called the Higgs Index throughout the apparel, footwear, and textile industry. So basically, she's gone and built this amazing system to index all of the good that companies are doing. The next two are Shannon Elizabeth, founder of the Shannon Elizabeth Foundation, obviously international renowned film and television actress who has focused her platform and experience to better serve conservation and protection for endangered species and the disadvantaged communities that surround them. And here to my left is Simon, Director of Operations for Shannon Elizabeth Foundation, a social and environmental mind strategist focused on developing unique and sustainable good ways of thinking of conservation and the urgent need to protect the nature, heritage, and uplifting local communities. So, after that long intro, sorry, let's get started with some of the questions. And again, this is meant to be casual. Let's just have a chat and see how we go. First up is for you guys from the Shannon Elizabeth Foundation. There are many NGOs that claim to be doing good and are out there trying to do really good causes. What do you guys do that makes you a bit different from your competitors?
Okay. Well, first off, we don't think of anyone as a competitor. Other NGOs, the whole idea is we need to work together. We need to be collaborators. I started this foundation in 2001, actually, as Animal Avengers. It's morphed into the Shannon Elizabeth Foundation. But when I started it, we were looking at organizations to support, and so much seemed to be going towards administration that I wanted to create something where we knew it was going into the field but then I could still work with these other organizations as an actress to help them as needed. So that was kind of the beginnings of it. And now that we're working in conservation, we've really noticed that when you look at syndicates, when you look at the people that are doing things like poaching, they are very organized. It's organized crime. It's the same people that are doing arms and drugs and human trafficking. And they're working together, and it seems like they're winning this war. So for us to win this war, we all have to work together. Everyone that's working for good, everyone that's trying to make a positive difference in this world, we have to start working together. And so that's what we think of ourselves as collaborators.
Yeah.
And then, when we took that philosophy, that principle of collaboration, and we said, how are we going to morph this into an action plan, and how are we going to make this operational on the ground? I think you still end up looking at these things as saying, what is the gap in the market, but what is the market in the gap? And for us, how we answered that was to more astutely look at where can we add the greatest voice to the momentum that's needed the most. And so we've identified 4 distinct pillars where we focus our operations at the moment. The one being addressing a major knowledge deficit within the public domain that stretches from a school level all the way up to policy decisions and legislation and sort of bilateral agreements on how we actually tackle things like illegal wildlife trade. And all too often we'll get presented with a decision of someone is pro-trade or they're anti-trade, but how do you actually understand? Where do you go to refute that information? It all tends to be very academic and very long-winded. So we've seen an opportunity to take our shared abilities of creating brands that tell stories and to be able to aggregate an industry's worth of information and to make it digestible and accessible to people at all levels, where we can turn passion into action in the most fundamental way, and that's at a mass market level. So we've got Wildlife Review Initiative, which creates reviews that deal with specific conservation or species-specific crises, and then Animal Avengers, which is the heritage of the foundation, is our youth brand, where we're looking to achieve a reality where we engage with youths around the world, and through cultural exchange and through societal experiences, we're able to understand the drivers of consumption and the drivers of poaching as an example, and to say how at a youth level can we inspire ways of discussing these issues and finding youth advocacy. Then with the information that we're able to aggregate from the industry, and we deal with all the major organizations from WWF to I4 to all of them have participated in a lot of our programming because they see value in the collaborative approach. We're able to take this information and offer key counseling to decision makers, whether that be at a corporate philanthropy level or indeed at a state or at a federal level. So we're engaging more and more with legislation and laws as well. And then the last one is land. Conservation is a byproduct of an action, and that action is how do we find use for land and people to sustain themselves on that land in such a way that the result is conservation. We can't go out and just save a specific species without addressing the socioeconomic drivers behind land and the people that need to work that land. So that's our primary positioning of what we do.
And just one more thing to add. The first pillar that he talked about, Wildlife Review, the way that we are addressing that the people that are on the ground doing a real work often don't have time for social media, and they're not getting out there enough. So part of the idea of this review is we have a way that we're going to start trying to pinpoint some of the organizations making the biggest impact in the addressed crises. So like our first one is Rhino Review. So people making a difference for rhinos, and we want to start uplifting those organizations and programs to try to get them more funding. So it's not about getting us funding, but it's about getting them.
Yeah, getting it to where it matters the most, in the field.
I mean, there is a huge amount of philanthropic investment into conservation, but also often it is not being effectively utilized, whether that be through corruption in so many governments in my home continent of Africa, or whether it is just through top-heavy fraudulent activities of NGOs themselves. So if we can better direct philanthropic investment into the continent, and we can align that with what people believe on the outside, then we believe we can not just increase value in conservation, but also maximize the current value.
Excellent. Next up is for Corley. We all know the great work Patagonia is doing around the world, helping to support and save the planet. Can you take us a little bit inside the company a bit? So what does a company need to do to make the bottom line good, make a company make a bit of money, but also where it's doing good for the real world, doing good for the environment? What's it like from a structural point of view, internally and externally?
Sure. So a couple months ago, our founder decided we needed to update our mission statement, and we'd had a mission statement which really grounded our work for 20-something years, and he believes, as our CEO believes, that change is incredibly important. And so pretty quickly, actually, we updated the mission statement, evolved it, and now it's simply, we're in business to save our home planet. And every single person that's hired at the company is hired because they demonstrate a commitment to that. They really believe it. And that doesn't matter if you're in accounting or if you're on the product side or if you're in IT. We are all in business to save our home planet. And I think that there's a lot of great mission-driven companies out there, but to embed your mission in everything from your hiring practices to your supply chain and how you make purchasing and supplier decisions to how we market and how we choose to tell the stories that we tell around our products. Every bit of it is sort of rooted in that. And I really do think that changes sort of everything about how our company is run. It's also how we prevent greenwashing, which we're really concerned about, because there are a lot of companies that say they want to do good, and I think actually many want to do good, but they kind of end up cutting a lot of corners and so I think our mission and being fully transparent about what you can and can't solve and taking our customers on that journey is a big part of that proposition when you join our community.
Yeah, I think it's a really good point. I several times got those briefs where it's almost like the marketing department's problem to solve it, and they've got to go off and do their campaign to say that, oh, we're doing great work, and then you go inside. Actually, just this morning I saw an article about exactly that during Women's Day and how many campaigns came out. And it's like you go inside and you realize more than half of them still have unequal pay, unequal working practices, and unequal everything else. It's like it just becomes a marketing tool versus an actual core tool. No, thank you. Amina, how does the work at Sustainable Apparel Coalition support in bringing all of this kind of stuff together? Because you really are like the glue between lots of these different kinds of businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So the Sustainable Apparel Coalition, for those who may be less familiar with it, is a global multi-stakeholder organization. And we have 234 companies that represent actually every part of the value chain, from brands, retailers, manufacturers to NGOs, academics, governments, service providers, who are all working together to drive social and environmental responsibility throughout the value chain. Our vision is actually of an apparel, footwear, and textile industry that produces no unnecessary environmental harm and has a positive impact on people and the communities in which we operate. And the reason to have such a bold vision and the reason to bring everyone together is because, as Shannon mentioned, it is going to take all of us, right? It's about collaboration. It's about bringing everyone across the value chain together to ultimately transform it. What's interesting is that the SAC was actually founded by two really, really different companies, Patagonia and Walmart, who came together and said, hey, look, what we've been doing in the industry is really not working, right? And so we need to actually think of a better way to address some of these really systemic and really difficult challenges. And I think what's really amazing about that is you have companies who came together in a pre-competitive space to say, how do we work on the things pre-competition, how do we work on the things that we all know really matter and we know need to change, and that individually no one company can actually do on their own. And so what we've done at the SAC is we bring all of these companies together and we have them work on tools that are built by businesses for businesses. And so the Higg Index is The Higg Index is essentially a suite of tools that companies can use to assess their social and environmental performance across all aspects of the value chain. So that's from how products are produced to how they're manufactured to a brand's own management and business practices and their retail operations through logistics.
What do your business practices look like from your hiring to your supply chain, and how far are you willing to pull back the layers of the onion? Because a lot of companies look pretty good on first peel, but the deeper you go, the more you'll uncover. And that's really important. We've recently at Patagonia gotten way more into agriculture, and we are interested in this movement called regenerative organic agriculture because it's a way that we can actually give back to the planet. In fact, it shows signs that it might even reverse the climate crisis. And so in the apparel business, you call it from dirt to shirt. So working with these farmers, changing the way that they grow their cotton. We switched to organic cotton 22 years ago. We've learned a lot from that. It cost us a lot, and there were a lot of lessons learned. Now customers are demanding it, just as they're demanding more organic food. But we're taking it a step further, and we're looking at making sure animal welfare issues are so this is the regenerative organic standard looks at animal welfare issues, soil health issues, and social fairness issues. And it is massively complicated, but we feel it is really the only way we can stay in business. We talk a lot about David Brower's quote, "There is no business on a dead planet." And we all need to be looking at our companies this way and to be going that deep. And the good news is, if you're a smaller company, I actually think many of these changes can be easier to take on, and especially on these issues in sort of the agriculture space. And we are so happy to do the heavy lift. I was talking earlier with a pretty major brand. We were talking about Fairtrade Certification, and that's another example of we go into these factories, we work with Fairtrade USA to convert them to be Fairtrade factories. So that's the hard part. Then all these other companies that are manufacturing in the same place, they just have to pay the premium, and then their products can be Fairtrade certified too. And that premium makes such a difference in the lives of these workers. But the bigger brands are taking on the heavy lift of converting these factories. Then it's just deciding, are you willing to increase slightly on the margins to make sure that the products you sell are Fairtrade certified, which really makes a big difference for these workers.
Yeah, really, really great points. Amina, how about you? What advice and tips could you give to maybe the larger companies, or maybe even the smaller ones that are starting up and they want to have good at the core of what they do, so they're giving back more than they're taking?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, first, for all the brands and retailers who are not part of the SAC, you should become part of the SAC. Because to Corley's point, though, you have all of these companies who are actually doing all of the work to figure out what is the right thing to measure, right? What's the right thing to assess from a social and environmental performance? And there's a lot of learning that comes through best practice and collaboration, right? So much of what happens at the SAC is that companies are actually talking to one another, and they're talking about what does work, right? How do you do fair trade? How do you actually engage your supply chain? And so it's really important to get more people into that conversation, to get more people talking about the issues and how they address them, and what can be done about it, and how they can actually collaborate together. We've seen so much really good collaboration come through the SAC community and the network in terms of how do you build better tools, better resources, how do you support one another? If you're in the same facility, how do you work together, right? And that's part of what's really going to change the industry. And for those companies who are just starting out, you have to start somewhere, and you have to believe in it, right? People don't take on sustainability unless they actually really believe in it and it's actually going to align with their business. And so I think you have to do both. You have to believe in it, it has to align with your business, and you have to start somewhere. So you have to figure out where you are in order to figure out where you're going.
Great. And you guys, how would you advise businesses that need to have core in the business?
I think, for me, one of the things that I would love to see, and one of the things that frustrates me, but I think is so beautifully proven by brands like Patagonia, is that we tend to look at caring, or we tend to look at philanthropy as the domain of sort of a Mother Teresa. Dirt poor, you poor as a church mouse, you commit every cent, every every second of your life to a cause, or you're Bill Gates. Or you've made an absolute ton of money and you're going to give back a fraction to the planet and conservation. And what really intrigues me is the concept of mobilizing what I call middle-class philanthropy. And how do you accelerate that? And I believe that the strongest proposition for that is consumerism. And it is the decisions we make as consumers over deciding what we choose to buy and what we don't choose to buy. And that starts to ring fence a lot of the discussions over credibility of brands, transparency of production, etc. But you can't campaign authenticity. It's either in your DNA or it's not. But people and brands can grow, and we've got to have the bravery to go after that and to adapt to that. So I think that the moment brands understand that the responsibility is the opportunity, and then they're not separated, that with a growing community, we know that the younger generations are far more aware of these things that us grey-haired dudes didn't grasp as quickly. That there is opportunity and change. There isn't just responsibility. And if you see it in that paradigm, you can use a very similar company structure in terms of your organizational approach to profitability can be leveraged in another direction. We're not fundamentally changing the structure of companies. It's like standing on a tee box fixing your drive. You don't change it by 50 degrees. You just move the club face 1 degree. And we can achieve these results.
And let me just add that with a lot of brands, if they're starting to make change, but they don't do it all the way, then they get criticized. And now they feel like, well, do I keep trying to make more change or do I not do it at all? Because then you don't criticize the ones that aren't even trying. So, we see this a lot in South Africa. They don't try at all, so they are who they are, and people leave them alone. But the ones that are starting to make those changes but haven't fully gotten there, they just get attacked all the time. And rather than supporting each other and helping them to get there further, now they're in this spot of like, well, what do we do? Because nothing is ever enough. So I think the support of being able to start to move toward, the direction of being sustainable all across the board, you just have to start somewhere.
Yeah, no, really great advice. And it's like actually quite similar to what everyone else has been talking about. It's if you're not the expert, go and become partners and friends with someone who is, and at least try. Don't pretend you even if you don't know how to try, then at least to do something. The last one is almost like a little bit of a role play. There's a lot of great companies out there, some nice companies we all admire, who aren't really doing what they could or should maybe, and make the changes that we believe that them as powerful brands that customers love could do more. If I was going to take each of you and put you in what maybe their CEO role or the role of their one of their leaders or one of their businesses, what would be the first thing you would maybe try to do in a corporation to start getting the needle to shift, start getting to see the change? It is hard, especially with big corporations, so it can be quite gentle, but like you said earlier, when it's a startup, it's easy. With the big corporations, it's a lot harder, but how would each of you address that change and go after it, and what would you do on day one? I guess we'll start with you, Amina.
Sure. So from day one, part of what the SEC does is build these tools that help companies assess where they are. And I think, as I mentioned, it's really hard to figure out where you want to go without knowing where you are. So actually digging in and using these tools to understand your entire value chain, from the products you make to your management practices to how your supply chain operates, like it's really important. Like you can't really you can make incremental change, but if you're really talking about how do I actually fundamentally change the way a business operates, you need to understand it end to end. And that's where tools I think are really important to figure that out. And then what you do is you say, how does the biggest impacts that I have, how does that align to what I'm doing as a business? And where do we want to start making changes? And to Shannon's point, you got to start somewhere, right? So figure out what that is, figure out where you have impact, figure out where you have influence, figure out who you can collaborate on to make change, and then start actually making progress towards it and measuring it and demonstrating it and being really transparent with your consumers and your company about the progress that you're making. And I think part of it is also just about talking about success and talking about failure. And I think that's really important. You know, a lot of times it's really hard for brands and companies to talk about the things that don't go well, but at the same time, when you think about consumer trust and, you know, what consumers believe in, they want to know that things work and things don't, and that's a little bit tricky, but at the same time, I think it's really important to bring consumers along the journey, and to say, here's where we are, here's where we want to go, and here's how we're going to get there. So those would be the things I'd start with.
Okay. Corley, how about you? How would you start?
I was going to say that I do think it's important to start with an acknowledgement of what you're not good at. No matter what industry you're in, I would start there. But ultimately, and maybe this is just because it's been so fresh at Patagonia, but I really think that having a mission for your company, again, no matter what industry you're in, it really helps root all of your employees. And so figure out a mission that is fundamental to your core business, whether you're in banking or healthcare or whatever it is, and find a mission that will root and rally your employees, because I do think it helps. It gives people their marching orders every day when they come to work. And if you can come up with the right one, it really can end up grounding business decisions for you. And I think it gives you guidance and work on that. I mean, acknowledge that the mission statement isn't going to come to life on day one. Hold on to it for 20 years and look back and see what that progress is, and then evolve it. I think that's what you want. And like, young people are demanding this. Like, it's happening whether you do it or not. And so you might as well get on the train and kind of figure out what is your mission? What are you doing that's bigger than the products you sell, the services you provide? Yeah,
the why you exist kind of thing, yeah. Shannon, Simon, how about you guys? How would you advise?
I think it's, you know, where are you entering this debate from? Are you starting, or are you a 20-year-old company? And I think that we've got to choose our perspective on how we frame up the discussion internally. And I think it's all centered around the acknowledgement that the position we're in to defend our planet is the war in which we're in to defend our planet. We're in triage, and we've got to prioritize not just what are we doing for ourselves, but also what we are doing externally. And I think within that, something that I read a couple of days ago, which kind of sits in my head, is that someone said to me, you know, we're not all in a position to help animals, but we are absolutely all in a position to not harm them. And I think understanding the fundamental difference between what we do as a company and what we do as our legacy are two different debates, and we need to acknowledge that at the outset. And I think in doing that, we can start to prioritize where can we stop the rot, where can we stop the harm, and do that. Because I think that a lot of these fundamental changes in organizations are a cultural shift, and you can't campaign it. It's got to be in your DNA. And again, organizations like Patagonia prove it, that if it's in your DNA, you can keep building on it. And, the point about how it rallies your staff when they can see change, when they become champions of change and not just advocates of change, you start to rally a different psyche within the organization, and that can definitely spill over. And then from a starting perspective, what we're trying to get right, one of our programs is to develop a social impact investment that allows us to enter the tourism industry in South Africa and build a lodge where the trading dividends of that go straight back into our programming of developing orphanages, youth education centers, and so on. And at that right of the start, as opposed to looking at it halfway through a business's life cycle, is we've got to look at it and listen. Above all else, just listen to people that know more. Engage with your community, engage with your supply chain, and understand their challenges before you resolutely put down mandates of change.
No, that's all. I've heard about the lodge before. It sounds really incredible. It also is going to be supporting the local economies and the local, the village nearby that's going to be helping staff it and grow all the produce for this. And it's really nice that it's not just it's almost like a eco business that is going to finance itself, which I think is a great thing that lots of businesses can learn from, where they are making money, but they're helping it to go back into the system and going down to this idea, if we don't have a planet, no one's going to have a business anyway. So that's it with my questions. Thank you all very, very much. I don't know if there's any other final points, final things anyone would like to bring up or chat about.
I mean, I'll just acknowledge, I do think the Sustainable Development Goals give us a framework for the issues that are the most pressing. So, like, the homework has been done, and I believe pretty passionately they all kind of lead up to the planet and they all roll up into that, but they get into a whole lot more. So I think kind of taking a careful look at each of them and like, where do you measure up? How much do you think about them? What does that do for your business? What does that do for your community? It's a good place to start.
Absolutely. It's there's so much knowledge and experience out there already. If you don't have it, you can quite quickly and very, very easily get it. No huge investment in strategists to do it.
And I'd just like to say, looking at it from more of a spiritual level, I mean, for money to flow, for your business to do well, money must go out for it to come in. So I think it's never going to hurt you to do the right thing, to partner with an organization or to have a charitable arm of your business so that you're always going out, you're always giving, you're always doing something that makes the planet better, in addition to how you run your business, how you hire. I mean, obviously, there are simple things that we should all know, that if you're a restaurant that serves meat, then you're probably not going to be saving the animals. Make sure everything you do is in alignment with your mission. Yes. Yeah. I think it's that transparency. People see through all of that now, so you have to be authentic.
Oh, absolutely. My oldest daughter is 16 years old, and she's been online her entire life, and she sees through brands straight away. And this new generation will not accept brands that do not have some sort of core in it, because I think they're all a bit upset with us that we haven't taken more care of their planet, and it is theirs. We are only holding it for them. And she's really like big on the brands that are doing something proper, something good, something that can make a bit of a difference in the world. And she just blows off all the others quite quickly. So it's essential for the future of your business, actually.
I think on that, one of the things that I find quite fascinating, all of these huge multinational brands that will create products that are developed in these wonderfully authentic and sustainable ways, and that sort of campaign then disappears. All they've done is kind of highlight that they're not doing it in the rest of their business. They haven't just said, well, this is just one great product. Yes, it is a great product. But can we chat about the other 99% of your business? Because all you've just said is you're capable of it and you're not doing it. So how do we get you to a point as a consumer to demand that you take that range or that product and apply it to your entire organization? Because you've just proven to the world you can do it.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, I think from our perspective, this collaboration extends across everything. So it's not just brands and retailers; it's consumers who should demand this stuff. It's NGOs and governments working together, stakeholders, and everyone really trying to solve these big issues. Right? The Sustainable Development Goals it's everyone.